My favorite part of any TV show or movie is when our guy just destroys some dipshit with the verbal ass whooping of a lifetime.
You dropped 150 grand on a fucking education you could have got for $1.50 in late charges at the public library.
I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. In this building, when the president stands, nobody sits.
Devastating. And sometimes the damage extends beyond the screen. Paul Giamatti talked shit about Merlot in the 2004 wine thriller Sideways.
And if they want to drink Merlot, we're drinking Merlot.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
And it seems to have contributed to an actual decline in Merlot sales. So when I saw a viral TikTok clip from the new show Landman featuring a crotchety Billy Bob Thornton spewing a bunch of weird lies about wind turbines, it really bummed me out.
You want to guess how much oil it takes to lubricate that fucking thing? And its 20-year lifespan, it won't offset the carbon footprint of making it. And don't get me started on solar panels and the lithium in your Tesla battery.
And I'm not saying that TV needs to fact police their characters, but I am worried that the millions of people who saw the out-of-context clip might assume that the incorrect statements of a fictional television character are actually very smart and need to be spread far and wide. And luckily, spending a month of my life getting to the bottom of this is fun and interesting to me for some reason. Hi, I'm Rollie Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy degree and exactly 0 memorized Bible verses. And this is an episode about how disinformation gets around the internet. Welcome to Climate Town. The show Landman was co-created by Taylor Sheridan, aka the guy who made Yellowstone and its various prequels and spin-offs. If you don't know about those, ask your parents. They've seen every episode.
That land isn't mine. You see that fence? That's mine. That fence is mine. This field's mine. That fucking fence down there, that's mine too.
Spinning some bitch.
But we're not here to talk stone. Landman stars Billy Bob as an oil company guy who makes sure that they have land to drill on and that no one messes with their shit. In a scene that has since gone multi-platinum viral online, Billy Bob dunks on a city-slickin' lady lawyer who's been bamboozled by big green tech into believing that renewable energy is somehow good.
They use clean energy to power the oil wells.
They use alternative energy. There's nothing clean about this.
Please, Mr. Oilman, tell me how the wind is bad for the environment.
You have any idea how much diesel they have to burn to mix that much concrete? Or make that steel and haul this shit out here and put it together with a 450-foot crane? And its 20-year lifespan, it won't offset the carbon footprint of making it.
And watching that back, you may have caught yourself thinking, oh shit, I actually don't know how much diesel they had to burn to mix that much concrete. I must be a fucking idiot. But here's the thing, you don't have to know. Because a bunch of very smart people have already figured it out, and it's called a life cycle assessment. And the whole point is to account for the actual emissions over the lifetime of a wind turbine or solar panel when you factor in all the installation and maintenance, and they look like this. And if we look real close at this one, not only does a wind turbine offset the carbon footprint of making and installing and eventually disposing of it, but it will offset that carbon footprint in an average of 5.3 months. And study after study comes to a similar conclusion. It takes a few months to a couple of years to offset the lifetime carbon footprint, depending on a lot of factors, including the ones that he's so concerned about in the Landman speech. Wind turbines spend the vast majority of their lives producing fully carbon-free energy. So that 20 years thing seems kinda super wrong. But don't worry, there's more.
We have a 120-year petroleum-based infrastructure. Our whole lives depend on it. And hell, it's in everything. That road we came in on, the wheels on every car ever made, including yours. It's in tennis rackets and lipstick and refrigerators and antihistamines, pretty much anything plastic. Your cell phone case, artificial heart valves, soap, hand lotion, garbage bags, fishing boats, you name it. Every thing.
Now a lot of that is just true. Oil and gas are in every fucking thing. We started out lighting it on fire for energy, but over the past century we figured out how to weave it into every part of our lives, and especially anything involving plastic, which is almost entirely made from oil and gas. And this is a really common argument for why you should shut up and let oil companies do whatever they want. I mean, your socks are made of plastic, and we do use a ton of oil, and we are running out of it. But let's just think about that argument for one extra second. If oil and gas are such incredible tools for manufacturing, and it'll be really hard to find their replacement, then shouldn't we conserve those things? Shouldn't we stop trying to cram oil and gas into socks and water bottles and build millions of solar panels and wind turbines so we can stretch our finite and dwindling fossil fuel resources as far as they can go? But instead of doing that, America is now extracting more oil and gas than any other country on Earth ever. Forget Saudi Arabia, forget Russia, America is right now the first team all-conference #1 Friday Night Lights touchdown, full eyes, clear heart, can't lose of oil and gas.
Boys, my heart is full. My heart's full.
And not to get too into the weeds here, but oil in the US, and specifically Texas, is getting harder to extract every year. Landman is set in what's known as the Permian Basin. We've been drilling for oil there for 100 years, and for the first 80 years, it was just sitting in big, accessible pools right below the surface, waiting to blast out the moment a Beverly hillbilly tripped over it. But that stuff is basically all gone, and for the past couple of decades, the main way to get that good old French Kevin is by fracking, aka blasting the shit out of the shale rock, pumping it full of sludge, and sucking up tiny droplets of trapped oil and gas. Not only is fracking more labor intensive and costly, but it also requires exponentially more drilling and infrastructure since fracking wells deplete much faster. And on top of that, we've already fracked the juiciest, oiliest parts of the Permian, so we're getting less bang for our buck as the years go on. But instead of conserving our fossil fuels, or God forbid regulating them, we are sucking them out of the ground and putting them into every thing we can think of, because the free market is always right. Technically, in this case, the free market was subsidized by the federal government, which essentially meant they gave taxpayer money to private companies to develop fracking technology, but who's counting?
Suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest that was me, people. I just want you to
And what the hell, we're already here. Let's do one more.
If the whole world decided to go electric tomorrow, we don't have the transmission lines to get the electricity to the cities. It'd take 30 years if we started tomorrow.
We definitely do need major electric grid updates in the US and the world. In the US in particular, we have an insanely piecemeal patchwork of transmission lines built by thousands of independent utilities who are mostly focused on local service without really thinking about how the whole country fits together. But if Billy Bob is worried about new construction, he is in the wrong business, because oil and gas requires an incredible amount of infrastructure. I guess Billy Bob's character just draws the line at infrastructure that doesn't involve oil and gas? Whatever the case, it's inconsistent. And also, we don't need to start working on this tomorrow. We're already working on it. The world already spends around $500 billion per year on electric grid and storage, and there are lots of viable options for upgrading the grid and transitioning to clean energy in the next 10 to 15 years. A task, I will add, that would be much easier if fossil fuel companies would stop actively blocking progress on renewable energy and grid updates. But you don't have to take my word for it. Take it away, hidden camera footage of ExxonMobil lobbyist Keith McCoy.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that. You know, we were looking out for our investments. We were looking out for our shareholders.
And speaking of Exxon, there was one last little throwaway line that we should take a look at.
Who owns them?
Oil companies. We use them to power the wells. And believe me, if Exxon thought them things right there were the future, they'd be putting them all over the goddamn place.
Okay, what the f is this argument? If wind turbines worked, where are all the wind turbines? You're surrounded by wind turbines. That's why you're talking about them. There's 15,000 wind turbines in Texas. Lawyer lady saw a bunch of wind turbines and asked you about them, and you said, oh yeah, the oil companies own them. What are you talking about? Okay, number one, a ton of oil companies are putting them up all over the goddamn place, like BP and Shell and Total. I think they only name-checked Exxon because they're the most recognizable oil company that isn't diving in on renewables. And number two, Exxon's an oil company. That's what they're good at. I mean, they've tried other stuff to see if they can expand their horizons. Profits. But their bread and butter is oil. And now I'm hungry. Fuck it, think about it this way. Spaghetti is a fantastic food item, but no matter how many times I try to order it from McDonald's, they refuse to serve it to me. They make burgers and fries. They'll try a salad, and for about a month in 2023, they murdered about 30% of Gen Z with Grimace's purple poison, but the absence of a McSpaghetti on their menu does not mean spaghetti isn't a viable food. They just love burgers, like Exxon loves oil.
I love gold.
Okay, but that clip would be perfect if you said oil. I love oil! Perfect. Whatever. The part of this that really gets my apples is that none of these arguments are new. The whole monologue reads like a now that's what I call climate denial's greatest hits album. These exact anti-renewable, pro-oil talking points have been tested and repeated for years, and the ones that performed the best with the general public got repeated again. This whole you owe modern society to oil and gas argument pops up in advertisements, nature documentaries, the Epcot Center, Facebook memes, even children's books. I literally have a children's book written by an oil and gas lobby group and distributed to public schools that uses the same oil and gas are in everything angle. And it's not a secret who's been pushing this narrative. For decades, fossil fuel companies and their many industry lobby groups have spent millions upon millions of dollars on disinformation campaigns and PR stunts and advertisements, even influencer marketing campaigns. There's a gaggle of articles you can read about this, but in my opinion, you should start with the Drilled podcast from Amy Westervelt. There's a link in the bio, but here's a little taste to wet your whistle.
Exxon as a company was putting ads in the newspaper that were contrary to the research that they were paying us to be doing.
So this is an experiment in shifting public opinion away from urgency.
The TLDR is that oil and gas companies decided that the best defense is a good offense, and they've spent years chumming the waters with disinformation to convince the public of everything from natural gas is clean to wind turbines are a bunch of dirty, gas-guzzling bird assassins.
They're noisy, they kill the birds. You want to see a bird graveyard? You just go, take a look, a bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday. You'll see more birds than you've ever seen ever in your life.
And it's finally time to get to the bottom of how this clip got into an episode of Landman that otherwise had nothing to do with wind turbines. Because folks, I think I figured it out. And I will tell you. Because I like you and I want you to have a satisfying ending to this video. First things first, it wasn't an oil industry executive who secretly and carefully wrote this out and then slipped it into a script so that Billy Bob would pop off about renewable energy. So maybe it was Billy Bob himself. I mean, after all, his performance was a little too perfect. And he is from Hot Springs, Arkansas, a mere 2-hour drive from the location of Arkansas's first major oil discovery, a little town called Stevens, Arkansas, population 770. So maybe Billy Bob just had an axe to grind for years, and he wrote that monologue himself to settle a score. I mean, after all, he did write, direct, and star in an inexplicably fantastic movie, Sling Blade, where he played an intellectually challenged man, and somehow it still holds up 30 years later. So we decided to watch some press interviews of Billy Bob for the show Landman to see what there was to see.
And by the way, this, as you can see, this is not like a preaching thing about oil is awesome. It's the ins and outs, ups and downs, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the oil business. It's not politicized or anything like that.
And that's basically how every interview went. He's not trying to forward a personal agenda other than trying to pull off wool hat under fedora, but make it pirate. And if that's his personal agenda, sign me up. No, obviously I'm just kidding. He looks insane. But then we found out that Landman was actually based on a podcast called Boomtown. And Christian Wallace, the creator and host, was not only on set for a lot of the Landman filming, he's an executive producer and co-creator on the show. Aha! We found the source. But then we listened to all 11 episodes of Boomtown. And it was really good. Christian worked in the Permian as an oil roughneck himself, and he'd been a writer for Texas Monthly for a few years before launching the podcast. And like a lot of his previous work, Boomtown focuses on the less well-covered human stories woven into the oil industry. The often brutal reality of an industry that might pay well when times are good, and then disappear completely when the price of a barrel of oil drops below the desired profit margin. And a lot of that oil and gas work comes with a ridiculously high degree of danger. And some of these stories make it right into Landman. This is a spoiler, so I guess watch out, but at the end of the first episode, 3 members of the same family die in a single oil field accident, just like in the 4th episode of Boomtown. But when it comes to climate change or oil's place in the world, Christian's work on Boomtown sounds nothing like the Billy Bob speech.
There is, of course, increasing pressure to move away from fossil fuels. Renewable energy is increasingly competitive. It's possible that the world will turn its back on oil long before the last drop is sucked from the Permian. One truth that's held steady for nearly 100 years is this: in the Permian, the next bust is always around the corner.
Really, of the entire monologue, there's only one line that actually sounds like it came from Boomtown, which again is a podcast mostly about the horrible choices and dangers of working anywhere near an oil field in West Texas.
Getting oil out of the ground is the most dangerous job in the world. We don't do it because we like it. We do it because we run out of options.
So if those classic corporate oil industry PR talking points didn't come from the guy who's the Permian Basin oil expert and co-creator of the show, where did they come from? To answer that, we'd have to go all the way down to the bottom. But first, a ad. Oh shit, it's a cliffhanger. If you're familiar with the internet, you'll know you shouldn't blindly believe everything that pops up in your feed. Lucky for you, there's Ground News. Ground News is an independent website and app whose whole deal is promoting media literacy and keeping you from falling into algorithmically generated conspiracy rabbit holes. By aggregating the world's news in one place, Ground News provides a data-driven way to compare coverage and stay informed with visual breakdowns of each publication's political leaning, reporting reliability, and ownership, allowing you to spot journalistic conflicts before they happen, like those freaky little milk kids from Minority Report. But I know what you want, an example. Let's take a look at Trump's recent decision to pause offshore wind development. It looks like about 30 news sources have covered the story, primarily leaning center or left of center, and only a single right-leaning publication has written about it. They focused heavily on Trump's interesting beliefs that wind turbines are evil, bird-killing machines that cut the value of your house in half. A little perusal through the other articles Ground News aggregated reveals another side of the story, the environmental impacts of kneecapping a source of non-carbon energy. Different! In a way that doesn't seem totally random. But my favorite Ground News feature is the blind spot feed, where you can see the stories the publications you usually read might not cover. Ground News helps you think more critically about how news spreads or doesn't spread, and if you're trying to wrap your head around how our world keeps getting more and more divided, I highly encourage you to check it out. And you know what? Just because I like you, yes, I'm talking to you, get an exclusive 40% off discount on the Vantage level subscription. That gets you access to every single goddamn feature on the app, including bias breakdowns, ownership tracking, and the blind spot feed. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code that's right on the screen to head to ground.news/climatetown to get started. That's ground.news/climatetown for the full story and 40% off. It's a screamin' deal. And now back to Climate Town and the answer to how the oil propaganda got into the television show. And we're back. Next stop, the very bottom.
How strange is it that we put like a monetary value on actual life itself? Wow. It's just such a strange concept.
Yeah.
Did you see that guy accidentally hit that moose with his car?
No.
Holy shit. Jamie, pull that video up.
That's right. I listened to an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, specifically episode 2083, a full 3.5-hour-long interview with Landman's other co-creator and only credited writer, Taylor Sheridan. And guess what I heard?
That would make sense to me, why the government would keep that information from people. Because if we found out that people were essentially just a vessel of souls, and that we are essentially designed to give birth to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it was a lot of that. Like, a lot. At one point, Joe Rogan is pretty sure that Tucker Carlson has evidence for the existence of aliens, except they're not aliens, they're angels and demons who are farming human souls because these angel aliens eat AI. And I'm not fucking joking, that's really what's in this episode. My God, how is this one of America's most popular podcasts? But about 49 minutes into this episode, we gain some really interesting insight into the Landman script.
Nothing makes me crack up more than the Stop Oil people when they're blocking the highway with clothes made with oil. Like they have rubber.
This is one of my me.
It's fucking insane.
I'm making a TV show about this right now. Yeah, called Landman with Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh wow!
About the oil industry and about energy.
Interesting. Well, let's not jump to any conclusions here. I mean, he was nominated for an Oscar for writing Hell or High Water. Maybe let's give...
There's this debate about climate change, which, by the way, climate's always changing. It was changing before we showed up. We're more likely to run out of oil before we find its pure replacement. I mean, look, let's look at all the shit on your table made out of oil. The headphones, the soles of my shoes.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, the socks I'm wearing, everything.
And there it is right there. It's the Billy Bob monologue, but worse. It seems like Taylor Sheridan has heard oil lobby talking points, remembered them, and then wrote his own version for Landman. But as we listen to these guys talk for another 2 hours, we get to something even more telling.
But people don't understand... they're mandating all these electric vehicles in California. 75% of California's electricity comes from fossil fuels. About 15% comes from wind and alternative energy. And then they still get a little from nuclear.
This one is wild to me. He's not even close on those numbers. He's doing a Good Will Hunting style monologue, but he doesn't know any of the actual stats. I mean, he's a good writer, and his instincts tell him he needs to say some numbers there, so he just kind of makes them up. And he's way off. According to the actual numbers from the California Energy Commission, renewable and no carbon energy in 2023 clocked in at 58%, with fossil fuels coming in at 42%, which is right around half of what Taylor Sheridan said. Weirdly, he gave wind power too much credit in California and then forgot about solar generation. And I mean, if I had to speculate, I might guess that because Taylor lives in Texas, where they do get a big chunk of their electricity from wind, he assumed maybe it'd be similar in California, so he riffed some numbers that would support the thing he wanted to say. Which again, was wrong, but it sounded pretty good. I actually have a podcast called The Climate Denier's Playbook, where I look at old climate denial talking points with my co-host Nicole Conlon, and Joe Rogan and Taylor Sheridan hit like 75% of the talking points.
Every one of their predictions has always been wrong. I mean, if you go back to Al Gore's
Kilimanjaro,
Inconvenient Truth,
supposed to no snow by 2006 or something
all
like
bullshit, all wrong.
Let's just say we took a corner of Utah and we just solar paneled that f***er. Guess what we can't do? Get it anywhere. We talk about things that warm the planet.
Yeah, that did a lot of warming for sure.
I've never heard no one's mentioned the 1,000 nuclear bombs we set off.
And for the record, I don't think these two dudes are taking bribes from the oil industry. I just think that they are repeating stuff that they've heard without actually checking to see if it's true. They're basically sharing a Facebook meme, except they have massive audiences, a dozen television shows, and access to Billy Bob Thornton. And they're doing it in a deeply unself-aware way.
Because I can't stand to pay money and have somebody preach to me their ideas.
We're in a weird time where everybody has a say, and I don't think everybody should be able to talk. It's like, I mean, everybody should be able to talk, but through social media, that gets just broadcast en masse to the world. And you get these groups of people that they huddle up in these fucking echo chambers and they duke it out.
I just read something in the last day or two that, and I'm going to get it wrong, but 1937 is closer to 1984 than 2023 is to 84.
He did get it wrong, but not because he's being paid off by big number, because it's a thing he heard one time and it sounded right to him, so he repeated it. And I get it. We all want to be goodwill hunting, but if you're trying so hard to own the libs that you're making shit up to reinforce some propaganda you heard, you're not goodwill hunting, you're the ponytail guy. And while I can't say for sure where Sheridan heard all this stuff the first time, it seems exceedingly likely that we can eventually trace it all back to the fossil fuel companies who have been spending millions of dollars to spread these messages as far and wide as they could. And frankly, it was a great plan. Oil executives in the 80s didn't have to kidnap a young Taylor Sheridan and force feed him lies about wind turbines so he would grow up to write a snappy monologue to poison the well against renewable energy. They just made a big vision board so they could capture as many minds as they possibly could, and one of the minds happened to be this guy.
Spinning some bitch.
So what are we gonna do about it? Well, the first step is to get more informed about climate disinformation. Incredible journalists have built careers investigating and breaking stories and writing about disinformation, and you should read their work and follow them on social media and support them whenever possible. We put a list of some of our favorites in the description. Seriously check them out. The sad fact is that there's a lot of bullshit out there, and it's not obvious that whatever you're reading or listening to or watching is accurate. It isn't obvious how long a wind turbine takes to work off its carbon debt, or what California's electrical grid mix is. If I hadn't just done a video about natural gas, I might never have realized that Sheridan's very confident rant was actually a sort of fossil fuel fan fiction. I mean, look at this chart. Looks legit, it's all bullshit. I just made up a bunch of numbers, it's that easy. And judging by recent events, the level of bullshit is going to increase. In the proud tradition of a billionaire with a social media network, Mark Zuckerberg released a video about how Facebook will be rolling back fact-checking. So arming yourself with a better understanding of how to spot propaganda is a really good idea. Uh-oh, did I just spend a bunch of time pushing a narrative that learning about climate disinformation was good and then come to a self-serving conclusion? You bet your apples I did. I learned it from the best. Whoa, location change. That's right, I'm in sunny San Francisco for something completely unrelated to this episode, but I figured this would be a good place to tell you about Climate Town hats. But not just any old hats, we're not gonna get got by Billy Bob on this one. These hats contain no plastic. We've wanted to make hats for a while, but it turns out that basically any hat that looks like this contains a ton of plastic.
Every f***ing thing.
But then our partners over at Ethics Merch found a company called Rustec. Rustec was started by two brothers, Clayton and Miles. They have no regard for their own personal safety. And like a lot of outdoorsy folks, they care about the planet, specifically the snow parts. But unfortunately, outdoor gear and apparel is basically all plastic, like this or this. So they set out to make outdoor stuff from natural materials, like wood and cork and cotton and hemp. And that led them to make this hat. But then they realized that even though they'd worked so hard to promote natural materials, the hat was still mostly plastic. So they went back to the drawing board and they created a design that is 100% natural materials, and here it is. They replaced the normally plastic brim with a thin layer of bamboo covered in cork, and they worked with a factory in Canada to replace everything plastic and crank out hats. Now at this point you might be wondering, are the hats actually any good though? Yes. Yes they are. Now honestly, we were a little nervous that it would feel too different from a normal plastic hat. But then we spent the past 4 months wearing the shit out of them, sweating into them, washing them, waving them around, and throwing them on the ground and stomping on them like an angry Little League baseball coach. And we can confidently say, we like these hats so much, we decided to make our own. So here we are in this truly beautiful place, introducing the first ever Climate Town hat. And they look like this. Nice. The art was actually really easy to make, because we didn't do it. We worked with this incredible artist named Jeff Lopalato from Planet People Studio, who created this slick design that combines the official Climate Town eagle with hat. Very nice and not at all plastic. And I know almost every other thing in the world still has plastic in it, but we just wanted to look into some alternatives. And one of those alternatives is brought to you by the good folks over at Rustec. God bless those out of control, all natural lunatics. So if that sounds like something that you would like to put on your head or the head of a loved one, by all means, get yourself an official Climate Town hat. Link in the bio, pitch over. And that's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. As always, the best way to support us is through our Patreon page. We got behind the scenes clips, bloopers, access to the Climate Town landline. You can just call me directly and I have to answer. I'm legally obligated. We got early tickets to our live shows, monthly video calls, and so much more. Patreon is the glue that holds the whole channel together. So if you want to see more of this, either in a general sense or an acute extended scene kind of sense, we got them both. What a deal. We've also got a kick-ass newsletter written by Climate Town writer-director Matt Nelsen and me, and we've also got a bitchin' podcast called The Climate Denier's Playbook, co-hosted by my friend and Daily Show writer Nicole Conlon and executive produced by Ben Boult. And if you're feeling like you want to check out Landman, let me strongly recommend that you first listen to all of Boomtown instead. And after you hear all 11 episodes, if you still want to hear what Taylor Sheridan has to say about the oil industry, then I guess go right ahead. Alright, that's the end of the episode. Remember, don't believe everything you see on a screen. A lot of those guys are just reading off of cue cards. Dramatic pause. Okay.
Okay.
I have not tried marijuana. I have never used it at any time.
Did you hear that, Pop?
Goodbye.